Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the Open Box Science 2022 Symposium in Science Communication today. We're very delighted today to learn more about science communication, which is an increasingly important topic for scientists. And as many of you might know already about Open Box Science, we're a 501c nonprofit that empowers scientists by really facilitating open research talks that help us learn, facilitating diverse career development, which I think we'll learn from a lot of great panelists today, enhancing science communication. Today we have 3 sessions, and the first session will be on using multimedia to connect and communicate science. The second section will be using social media for science communication. And the last session will be about diverse science communication career. In the first session, today we are very delighted to have 3 distinguished panelists, and here my co-moderator, Gustavo, the main moderator for this session, will introduce them for you. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much for this amazing organization, and Open Box Science, for the ones that doesn't know, they make a very great job in scientific communication to spread science all around the world. So I would like to start here. I also agree. Thank you for the invitation to being here. So we're gonna have 3 amazing panelists today. Fortunately, we have the connection with 2, and the third one might not be joining right now, but we hope that she can come straight from Ethiopia. So I would like to start with our first panelist, so Julius Wesche. And I would just say that he earned his PhD in 2021, so fresh doctor here. And he finished his PhD in Utrecht University between sustainability transitions and innovation theory. That sounds really great. But not only that, he also has 3 podcasts, and that's amazing. So Julius, can you join us, please? And please briefly introduce yourself and tell us more about you.
Yeah, hi Kuan, hi Gustavo. Thanks for having me today on the show on this Open Box Science Symposium. It's really a pleasure to being here. Yeah, my name is Julius. I'm German, but I live in Norway. That's why there's this lovely bench here. You can see it a little bit. This is Norwegian style. I work in science for 10 years, first at Fraunhofer, and then I did a PhD on the side at Utrecht University. And I always had the feeling that there is a lot of researchers who don't go the extra 3% that are maybe necessary in order to actually communicate their science. They're only looking for the next project or for the next paper, and that's okay, probably because our systems do not really incentivize science communication. But I feel that there's a lot of knowledge that can be shared, and it's also very often that people or researchers are not they just don't know where to start. So I try to support them, and that's why I did this 3rd podcast. But the first 2 ones are on the energy transition. One is in energy transition in Germany, and one on the energy transition in Europe, and that's in English. So thanks for having me, and looking forward to this session now.
Yes, sounds amazing, and we are very looking forward to learn a lot with you today. And our second panelist, the one that we're going to speak to us, she's Sherry Nouraini, and she has a PhD in genetics from the University of Toronto. She has a lot of activities also as a professor, and for here, she also works, and she's a founder and executive director of the Science Communication Journal Club, which is an amazing idea that helps scientists keep up with the latest information in science. So welcome, Sherry. Can you please present a bit more of yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, I'm Sherry. I teach biology at a college level in my city. So I'm a biology professor. I'm also the founder, as you mentioned, the Science Communication Journal Club, which is basically a grassroots effort, volunteer effort, where we help scientists keep up with information about social science, education, science communication, and we basically do it in the format of presenting papers. So we read the latest publications in science communication and all these fields that I mentioned, and present them as a summary. We started out doing it with presenting it as Twitter chats, but then now we have our own podcast, and we've also moved into the audio social platforms And we also try to what we call create SciComm scenarios where we create specific situations where scientists may find themselves in and help guide them with respect to how to drive the conversation. I'm also an author. I've written a book about how to communicate climate change. And I also taught science communication for climate change for a few summers. So done quite a bit of different things. And thank you.
Yeah, sounds great. So a lot of activities I see. And our third panelist, I think we have the connection with her, because in the beginning I said that probably she'll be a little bit later. So just present her. So she's Yiselamush Asefa, and she's a master's in health monitoring and evaluation from Jimma University in Ethiopia. And the amazing thing when I was looking to her work is that she has a radio program for promoting childhood vaccination, and as well as other things to do. So if she can hear me, I would love for her to introduce herself. So is she there? Yes, she is. That's nice.
Yes.
So please talk a little bit more about you. This would be great.
Okay, sure, I'm here. Thank you, Gustavo, for inviting me. I'm very happy to be part of this. I'm Yiselamush Asefa from Jimma, Ethiopia. Currently, I'm working in Jimma University, Department of Health Policy and Management, with the academic rank of assistant professor. I have also been working in various projects like innovating maternal and child health, focusing in the maternal health, and again, capacity building and the mentorship project that is focusing on data quality and information use. And also there are other projects, but the specific projects I want to introduce here is about the radio campaign message projects focusing on child vaccination. So in Jimma University since 2016. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very nice. So before we start with the questions, I just will make a comment here because our panel, so our session here is about using multimedia, and we cover many different things like podcasts, as we heard here, also radio. I'm a YouTuber, so we have a very different point of views here. So we hope to have that also a broad opinions and hints for the ones that want to start. That's great. So I think Kuan now will have some words for you to make the first question to initiate our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Gustavo. And yeah, we are trying to learn about multimedia ourselves too. So I see a lot of people already join the YouTube live stream. If you do have questions along the way, please feel free to ask through a chat, and we'll try to address it when we have time in the Q&A section. I see there's already 10 likes. Feel free to interact with us on the YouTube live session. We'll try to make it as interactive as possible. Okay, so my first question for the panelists, and whoever come up with something and want to answer first. I just wonder for each of you, how do your ideas come about? And maybe, you already talked a little bit about platform, but what, initially were the goals of your platform, and how has your audience response been? So you can approach this question any way you like, please feel free. Thank you.
Sherry, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Julius start, Sherry.
Okay. Okay. So how did how did the ideas come about for starting Science Communication Journal Club? Is that what you'd like to know?
Yeah, you're a main channel, yeah.
Yeah, so I just felt a need to be a space for scientists to come and learn about science communication, because scientists are already so busy. They just, we know we've been there, they're juggling multiple different things, and now the world has put something else on their plate, which is science communication, and it's a learning curve. So our goal was to create a platform where we can kind of summarize the information and things that scientists need to know in order to get started with science communication and implement effective communication strategies. And so we try different ways of doing that. One of the things that we do, because we really are interested in starting with the right footing, is creating a mission statement. We have an annual State Your Mission challenge, and we challenge scientists and anybody who wants to do science communication to sit down and write a mission statement. And then we choose the winner, and then we showcase them, give them prizes, things like that. So, and then as to ideas as to what to present when we present and create content, as I mentioned, we look at the literature and see what is out there. And then I also personally, and also my team, we monitor conversations around science and science communication, and we try to find conversations and situations in which that need to be addressed. And then we use content around that as well. I hope that answers your question.
Great. I see Yiselamush raise her hand. Maybe Julius can wait, if you don't mind. Thank you. Yiselamush,
Yes.
please feel free to take the mic.
Yeah. Actually, in here, I will focus more on our project. I want to talk about our previous projects. As you know, there are a problem. Actually, our ideas came specifically from the literatures or from the scientific works. There is, as you know, there is a problem with the coverage and the timeliness of childhood vaccination. It's really critical in the third world countries like my country, Ethiopia, as revealed by the literature. So our ideas came from the literatures or the scientific works. Then after that, our team tries to just work on that, on the solution, how we can proceed. So since there was a gap with the awareness and the other issue, we tried to come up with our project. So in addition to the other thing, our ideas specifically came from the literatures or from the scientific works.
I see.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Julius.
Yeah, thanks, Kuan. So I do two things in my life. First thing is I try to accelerate or help accelerate the energy transition in Germany, Norway, Europe, and beyond. And the second thing is I want to help and empower researchers to do better science communication, because I feel Sherry said it's a new thing on the plate. I don't think it's a new thing on the plate. I think it's, I think it's what we have to do, because most of the things we do as researchers comes from foundations, comes from taxpayers. And I think we have the obligation to actually talk about it, because only if we talk about it or if we write about it, then this thing we have or we do all day long can have an impact. And I think there we just have two big challenges to not talk about it. And if we just stay in our offices, nothing is going to happen with all the really good knowledge that we accumulate. And I've seen that too often, too much in universities, in research organizations where I've been working. So this is where it comes from. And I think your question, Kuan, was towards why choosing the channel that I chose. And I think, well, there's four ways how you can create content. The first one is you write text. The second one is you do audio, that will podcast. The third one is you make videos, and the fourth one is that you use photos and graphics to create content. And I think everyone has to realize, okay, what are you good at? What can you do at 10 o'clock at night? And some people can talk, some people can make videos, some people can write, and people can make graphics. And for me, it's really about talking. That's why I started podcast, and it just comes out naturally out of me, and I don't really have to think about it. I'm standing under the shower and I have ideas of what to do. So I think self-awareness is key when you talk about science communication. Self-awareness in a way that you have to realize what comes easy to you, because only if it comes easy to you, then you do it over time. And then just if you put pressure on yourself, you're more likely to get burned out. Sherry knows that, Yiselamush knows that. It's like if we do things over time, especially in research, it can be stressful, and you also you organizers know that. So I think we need to realize, okay, be self-aware. What is it? What comes out of you? What comes naturally to you? And this is the format that you can choose. And then when you have chosen your format, then you can see, okay, where can you distribute it? And distribution today is free. All the social media networks, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all free. And that's something we have to be aware of. It's like it's never been so easy. In the 70s, you needed a rocket to create a TV network. Today, the only thing you need is your phone, and you always have your phone with you. So I think there's so much opportunity, and I think self-awareness is the first thing to think about, and then you create your strategy.
Yeah, sounds good. That was a very good explanation. And I would like to continue on you, Julius, because we can start also another round of discussion here. So yeah, you explained, you put very well here that nowadays we have so many options like YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, podcasts, even meetings online. But now I would like to hear a bit from you personally. How did you choose this format? I think in your case, it's podcast, why it was best fitting for you. And I know that maybe Spotify is not the best way to interact with people, but I just want to know how it is for you to interact with all your listeners and audience.
Yeah, thanks, Gustavo. I think the first thing that you can think about when you provide content is that you always put yourself in the shoes of your target group and you try to provide value to that target group. Because if you don't provide value, and if it's just about me, I, look how cool I am, you're not going to get anywhere. And there's no one to communicate it with. There's no one to interact with. And then when they come for value, so if you create value and they come and there's more people to listen to you, I think first of all, that's a great honor. Like that we are invited here means that you've consumed content that we produce, and that is the biggest honor that we can have, I think. And once you realize, okay, there is people coming and they are interested in you, in your stuff, they don't come because of you, because no one cares about Sherry, about Gustavo, Kuan, me, no one cares, but they care about getting something to learn and that stimulates them or that even entertains them. And then you have to choose channels, if possible, that foster interaction. Obviously, if you do a podcast and it goes through Spotify, as you say, Gustavo, there's not very much opportunity for interaction. But if you then also just have a little Canva post picture that you post on Twitter and on LinkedIn and maybe on Instagram, and you tell your people in the podcast, hey, check out my other channels, then they will start interacting with you. But it's not that easy. So it's always also key to manage expectations. When you do something, at least plan to do it for half a year, for a year, for 2 years, forever, in perpetuity, because in the first half a year, in the first 20 episodes, nothing is going to happen, or it's very likely that nothing is going to happen. So interaction is key and it's great, and building community should be the goal in the long run, but it's nothing that comes very easy. It takes time, and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
I see. That's interesting. And I would also like to hear from Sherry. How do you use your social media to communicate with your audience? How it is? Do you also need the multi-platform, or do you think one platform, the one you chose, is enough? How it is for you?
Yeah, I think the choice for the platform would be the audience. So whenever you do any form of communication, the focus of your efforts should be about your audience, as Julius mentioned. So the reason we started with science communication with Twitter was because our main audience is scientists and people who do science communication, but mainly scientists. And based on our observations, when scientists started using social media, they mainly were present on Twitter. So that's where we started, because you want to go to the social media platform, you want to go to the places where there is a community of your audience. So that's where we started, but then we started adding on different formats of creating content, because we realized that different people use different types of content to consume information, and podcast is a very good form of it. Yeah, so, and if I would suggest is that, again, of any platform, Twitter is probably the best place to start, because if you're strategic about the way you build your audience and your content, you can build a community first. Again, if you do it strategically, there's not enough time here today to go into detail. You can build an audience, and then you can start your podcast and drive your audience to your podcast. Hey, yeah, let's see. I have a podcast, and a lot of interactions in places like Twitter is with conversation. So go into creating content. If you're going to go find those communities, go in there with an intention of having conversation with people rather than just pumping stuff and teaching them and talking at them. And I want to also echo what Julius said, is that it takes time. So you have to be patient. It is true that these platforms are free, but your time is not free. And this is why we at Science Communication Journal Club, we really emphasize sitting down and writing a mission statement and thinking about how you're going to do stuff, who you're talking to, and what is the best way for you and your audience to communicate them with. So don't just jump into the platforms. Be very strategic, because again, that's another thing that you have to do on top of writing grants, mentoring your students, going to conferences, figure out your research. So that's what I would advocate.
Yeah, that's a very nice piece of advice. So strategies are very important. And I think Julius wants to make a comment.
Yeah, I want to second two things that Sherry said. I think it is, I was talking about do what's natural to you, but I totally agree with Sherry saying you also have to think about where your target group is and what kind of consumption behavior your target group has. And if you can match these two, if you are feeling good with creating a specific type of content, and that's even the content that your target group likes, then that's the perfect match. So I definitely want to second and support that. And also I like what Sherry said. It's like, don't talk at them, but talk with them. So that's like key, because you show interest and like you show some love. And if you show love will come back. If you say, if you are in the old days of like going into a newspaper and like sending out, this is what I think is important, pam, 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 and you don't even give them the opportunity to come back to you, then they will not follow you. I'm not sure I like this word following, but they won't be part of your community because you're not providing them anything of value. And I want to challenge Sherry with one thing, if I may, and that is, Sherry, you said it's good to start at Twitter, and I totally agree that Twitter is probably the strongest platform amongst scientists, but I feel that over time, the organic reach that you get at Twitter has been gone dramatically. So over the last 10 years, like 10 years ago, Twitter 10 years ago, you had way more organic reach than you have today. And so there you see that different networks develop over time. And for example, now LinkedIn gives you a lot of organic reach. There's a lot of business people on LinkedIn, but there's also more and more scientists coming. So I'm just suggesting one could also think about, okay, you could also go into LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is really growing currently, and it's easier to surf on a wave of a growing network than of a network that's just been around for quite some time. But it always comes down and back to your target group. Sherry wants to say something.
Yeah, I think she raised her hand. So
please. I like that you challenge me, Julius. Yeah, so organic reach is one factor, but if organic reach is going down in all social platforms, and that's just a function of a platform growing in size. So there's this conversation, they're trying to limit us, so we spend money. Well, no, there's so much information that can be presented to your followers in their timeline. And as the platform increases in size, then it becomes more challenging to get organic reach. And as I mentioned, if you are strategic, if you know what hashtags you use, and the same thing applies to LinkedIn, especially with Twitter. I'm not saying that Twitter is the only way. I'm just saying that for us, our experiences has been that it's faster to build an audience on Twitter compared to starting a podcast in a platform. So the question is, okay, how do you get people to your podcast? And what I meant to say, what I was trying to say is that build your community first, and then you can drive that community to your podcast rather than starting a podcast where nobody's listening to, and then building it and then telling people, yeah, go listen to my whatever other platforms. Build your community first, okay? And with the social platforms also, another thing that is coming up is audio social networking, and Twitter has started that, LinkedIn is starting that, and that is a very, very fantastic way of building conversation people and building your audience. So I think Julius and I are kind of agreeing, but we say it in different ways.
Yeah, that's amazing to have so many different experiences here. So yeah, I think you gave your pieces of advice. I think the one starting, they have plenty of ways to have ideas from different ways to start. I think actually building a community is very important at the beginning, if you have like people that like your content and so on, to build social media. But you just mentioned about let's say spoken ways of communication, and that's what I wanted to hear from Yiselamush, because she has her radio program, and I just would like to hear a bit more on that. How did you choose to go for the radio and not other platforms to communicate with the general public, and also to somehow convince / inform people that they should vaccinate? So how does the radio work, or the idea?
Thank you. As Sherry said, before we reached the wider community, what we did was we conducted focus group discussion with various stakeholders, like the radio actors, mothers, health extension workers, just to get their perspective and their ideas on using radio as a channel as a media for childhood vaccination promotion. So based on their opinion, based on their idea, we just create this platform, the 10+10+13 approach. The 10 minutes is just for the radio drama, the 10 minutes is for the radio studio discussion, and the 30 minutes was the phone-in from the listeners. This is just come from actually the idea raised from us, but it was, the suggestion was given from the mothers and the health extension workers and the radio actors. Based on that, we just confirm our platform, and we just confirm using the radio other than the other media, because one of the response from the response from the mother was, they said that radio is easily accessible in the rural area. In Ethiopia, radio is easily accessible. Even they use their cell phones. So they recommend us to use radio other than from the other media of communication. So based on that, we choose radio other than the others. And also this 10+10+30 was confirmed by them. 10 minutes radio is enough. 10 minutes is enough for the radio drama. They recommend like this. If it is more than this, it may be not good. People may not listen to that strictly. So the 10-minute discussion was raised from us, and also they agree on that. But for the 30 minutes of the phone-in from the listeners, we give that because in Africa, people does not come to the point easily. They go around the bush. So we just give a wider minutes for the phone-in from the listeners. So based on the problem, we just identify our audience first and get the feedback from them. If we use a Facebook for promoting a childhood vaccination, it may not be feasible in our context, because in rural countries, there is no mother. There may be a few mothers who will use this as a communication channel. So we focused on the radio based on their opinions too. Thank you.
Oh, that's an amazing story. Yeah, that's very good. Let's say a practical experience of hearing the person to build your platform. That's really nice. And Yiselamush, I would like to keep with you, because we're just gonna change a little bit our question now. Because here the question I will make is, because we scientific communicators, of course, we try to increase our public the best way we can. So this means that we speak both with the scientists and the non-scientists. And in your case, I think you live exactly in this world, that you are in the scientific field, but your main focus is to speak to people that maybe has no clue what science is. So I would like to know about your experience. How are the differences to deal with these two publics?
Okay, thank you. It is really a good question. In scientist communication, frankly speaking, in most of the case may focus on the design, approach, the methodology, the background, the context. We may focus on the detailed information. But unlike that, in the scientist general public communication, as to me, it should have to focus on the key pointers. It should have to focus on the key pointers and free of jargon. They don't care about, as to me, they don't care about the background or the other problem. They want the key pointers to hear from us because it may strike them. So we should have to be strict to remove the jargon because the community, the general public community is from the different backgrounds. They may not understand about the design, the approach, or any other thing. We have to focus on the key point, as to me, and should have to be concise, and we should have to tell them the key points. But in the scientist communication, you may talk about the detailed information, the detailed information about the design, the approach, the context, and any other detail. I like that. We have to be concise, as to me, while communicating with the scientist general public.
I see. So summarization power, as well as a lot of take-home messages, correct? So that would be
we have to use easily understandable terms.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Sounds great. Yeah, that's an amazing piece of advice. So I would also like to hear from Sherry. What do you think about this difference between communicating to scientists and communicating to general public? And what is basically your focus? What your aim? What's your biggest aim at this point?
The communication between scientists and communicating between a scientist and a non-scientist and non-expert scientist is very different, obviously. We have, as sorry if I butcher your name, Yiselamush described, there is a lot of jargon in science, and science-to-science communication has a different goal. It's we discuss ideas and we present hypotheses, we think about the conclusions of our ideas, and everybody understands the jargon. But when you talk with someone who's a non-expert, you really, as she mentioned, you really have to go to the heart of the issues that a non-scientist cares about. And that's not a monolithic group. There are different sectors of people within what we call as general public. So when you communicate science with the non-scientists, you have to think about what do they care about? What does that audience care about? And they usually don't want to hear the technical details. They want the bottom line, okay? So just give them the bottom line and also have empathy, because there has to be, when we talk with the general audience, we come from a place where we know a lot and we may forget what it's like to not know. So it's very important to approach a non-scientist audience with empathy, with patience. A lot of times the non-scientist audience have been bombarded with misinformation, and you just have to have patience and a lot of listening, allowing people to talk to you and tell them your issues. Sometimes you just, one thing that I do often is that I just go to Facebook and social networks and I go to, let's say, pages that spread misinformation about vaccines or whatever. And I just read what people are saying, what kind of questions they have, what is this information that they're receiving. So a lot of good communication, whether with scientists or non-scientists, is with careful listening. A lot of it is listening. with an intent to understand. And what was the second part of your question?
Oh, I think you covered everything.
I answered it. Okay.
You were comparing basically the way to deal with the information that comes from the general public and from the scientists. And I see, from the general public, a personal experience. Sometimes there are questions that I would never imagine as a scientist, but they are doing to themselves. So it's really great to have the connection to both. That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you. And Julius, I would also like to hear from you. So how do you deal with this difference of communication between scientists and science general public? How do you communicate with the general public? What's your main focus?
Yeah. First, I want to support Sherry's field work. I love the way how you do field work to go into these Facebook groups. I've never done that, but that's actually kind of a nice idea. The thing is, this session is on multimedia, but I feel we're focusing quite strongly on social media, and that's fine. But I think social media attracts what you put out. So if you put a red hat on your head, then 99.9% don't care about that, don't like it, whatever. And there's the 0.1% that might be interested, and they stick. And so these are the ones that you talk to. And I think Sherry's approach of really going to such web pages, then you're really going where they are, whoever they are. And I also have to support this idea of there is no such thing as a general public. If you put out content at scale, they will find you, but that is a very particular specific group. And this thing of reaching the general public for a university, for example, that's a challenging thing. And I feel very often there are people who are into communication at universities, research organizations, wherever, and they have a budget, but they have a plan, then the budget is cut, and still the output, the ROI is supposed to be amazing. And that just doesn't really work. So the question in science communication very often is, I feel from my point of view, is getting the expectations right. Whom do you want to reach, and whom are you actually capable of reaching with the means that are at your fingertips, or that are available to you? And that's that's sometimes a statement that decision makers in research organizations don't really want to hear, because they want to reach them all, and that sometimes can be very tricky. Can I make one comment, Gustavo, about the multimedia part? Because we're talking so much about social media, but is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Because obviously social media is just one way of how you can communicate scientific knowledge, and that's just, and there on social media, if you put out a lot of content or content at scale, then you build your own reach, and that's great. But there's traditional ways of how you would reach the general public or your target group, and that would be through newspapers, through news channels, news media, whatever it is. And that's something that in all this hype of social media, I feel is sometimes a bit not forgotten, but it is a great way because they have so much reach. It's not that easy to control because you can't get on national TV every second week and say whatever you think is important, but you got to get asked. And for that, it's important to build a brand, and to build a brand, you build again on social media. So they interact and they fertilize, is that the word? I don't know, each other. But I think we shouldn't forget that writing an op-ed in a national newspaper or even a regional newspaper can also really be good. And there it comes again to what Sherry and Yiselamush were also talking about. It's the way how you communicate is then very different. You can't use the jargon. You can't make the sentences that are 3 or 4 lines long, but you have to be very precise, very short. And that sometimes is not so easy for researchers, me included.
Yeah, sounds great. So these are just amazing points of view. I think you all have it done. And I think I will just make, let's say, short questions that are specific to your let's say, area of activity. And I think once I heard from you, Julius, that the communication from the scientists can come from every step of the scientific development, not only after it's ended. So what's a bit of your point of view on this? So this should be, so if I'm a PhD, for example, should I communicate my science during the PhD or only after it's done, for example?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Gustavo. I think that's really important. Last Monday, I had the opportunity to give a talk to about 60 to 70 PhD students at the health department here at NTNU. And there was this lady who's just a second year PhD or just in the end of the first year. And she's already been talking communicating with another group of early career researchers about their topics, which was genetics related and microbiology. And I think that is so cool to see, because the earlier you start, the longer you give your target group the opportunity to find you. And it's not just about, it's so easy to think about, yeah, I do the project and in the end I have the report and then I post on Twitter and then that's it. And then you're like, oh yeah, then you have your results, but no one is going to see it because no one knows that you are about these topics. And I always preach, you have to provide value, you have to provide value, you have to provide value, but it's okay to just sometimes document your path to give others the opportunity to find you. And I think it is way important that it's not just the white male professors who are 60 years old who then go on the public radio or public TV and then communicate about science, because like that you actually influence the way how we see who scientists are. And scientists can be 25, female, have orange hair or pink hair or whatever. That's also science, so or scientists. So I think it's really important for young researchers to actually start, because like that you start building your brand, you start changing the perception of who scientists are in society, and you actually start from the beginning on to educate people and make sure that they know what you're about, what your research is about, and maybe you give them the opportunity to be curious, and then they see a role model in you and not in the 60-year-old professor, male professor in an Ivy school, but maybe they see, oh, I can also be a researcher, I can also do science. That's awesome. So I think, please, if you feel that way, start as early as you can.
Yeah, that's a very nice message. I like this one. And yeah, so basically every time is a good time to start, right? So just do it now. Yeah, that's good. So so I would like also to hear from Sherry. You also have a very vast experience in climate change and environmental research. So I just wanted to know from you how the communication can, or how effective can the communication of science be to change actually the behavior of people. And I think the environment is a very good example, also vaccines in this case of the pandemic, for example. So how it is.
So for to effectively communicate and trying to, as we say, nudge people to do the right thing, it again goes back to the audience, because when we think about changing behavior and we think about the general public, as we've heard before, both Julian and I say, that the general public is not monolithic. There are different segments of the general public that have different motivations, different life experiences, different worldviews. They care about different things. And a topic like climate change or any scientific topic can have different aspects of it. It can be, the issue can be framed in different ways, keeping in mind the motivations of the audience. So let's say become sustainable and going green and having a green way of creating energy, it's important, but it matters to different segments of the population for different reasons. So for example, and I've given specific examples of these and what kind of lines you want to use in my book. So the way you talk to, let's say, a business leader about the value of sustainability and having switching to a green energy, it's different. The motivation for a business leader who cares about the efficiency of their business and how it can affect their business is different from, for example, a mother or a teacher or someone who is in a religious denomination. They're very religious. So it comes down to really, to be effective, again, it goes down to sitting down. And first of all, I always recommend, doesn't matter whether it's science communication or in your general life, sit down and write a mission statement. Decide what it is you want to do, what's your message, who you want to reach, and then go and learn as much as you can about that audience. And another thing that really the scientific community and anybody in general, a service that they can do for themselves, for their efforts, is to learn about human behavior. There's a lot of nice books, set of books and literature out there in the social sciences, in psychology. These are humanities fields that the hard sciences have usually kind of have ignored. But if we are going to be able to effectively communicate our science, we have to understand how humans function, how they make decisions, and also we have to understand our own humanity, that we are human. Yeah, it comes down with how much background research you do and how much you understand your audience.
Yeah, I think in many aspects, basically, the understanding the public that you want to communicate is maybe a great part of the goal that you're trying to reach. That's actually a very good point. So I would like to hear from Yiselamush, a specific question for her work. So in my specific case, I'm also a YouTuber and I communicate in Portuguese. So I believe that her work also involves a bit of translation from the main language of science, which is English, to her mother language or even other languages in Ethiopia. So Yiselamush, if you could make some words on that, how it is to change this language or to break this language barrier for you. How are your experiences on that?
Yeah, the impact of language is obvious.
Yeah,
it is obvious. It is not only to reach out to the wider community. It was really challenging to train the stakeholders. In our project specifically, for example, the health extension workers were being trained by the foreign who was Anglophone in the presence of the local translator. The training was given by the foreign who was Anglophone. But there was a translator. There was a translator there, but there were a serious critics from the trainees. Even it is not about the wider community, but even while we trained the health extension worker, there were critics. So it is obvious, the impact of language is obvious. Again, while I was in my studenthood and in my career as a lecturer, our audience are really happy if we reach them in the language they speak. It is obvious. So we managed with the presence of the local with the local translator, but they recommend the medium of the training should be in the local language they speak. So we accepted it as a comment, and we will incorporate when we scale up at the national level. We will not just repeat this kind of mistakes. So what I want to say, the impact of language is obvious. So we should have to approach our audience with the language they speak. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds great. Basically, yeah, this language barrier is a very good question for people that want to communicate in their mother languages, which is not English. So it's always a very good question of how we're going to do it. So I have a very quick question from YouTube. And I think I can do for all of you. And maybe you can tell me who wants to answer first. So basically, it's how do you manage your science communication work with your formal job at the same time? So basically, I don't know who wants to start. Raise your hand or switch on the microphone. Maybe Yiselamush, I don't know. Yeah, you can go forward, Yiselamush.
Possible. Thank you.
Yeah.
I did my science communication conference and my job together. It was really cumbersome. It needs time, but I have to work that. I have to. It needs time. It is obvious. The science communication conference needs needs time. You have to prepare, you have to work on that. And also I have my own job, so I have to balance that. So I work like that. It needs time, so we have to give time and work on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. In addition on that, I think we all scientists live this counterbalance of work and scientific communication. I don't know. Any word?
Yeah, sure. I can say,
yeah.
I can for sure say something about it. So science communication comes on top, that's for sure. But the question is not maybe if it's possible to do it on top, but if I would look at anyone's, if we would sit down, jam together, and if you would give me the opportunity to look at your day, how it's structured, I would always think that there's probably some time which is not used wisely. You know, we all do dumb stuff sometimes, and we all Google different, I don't know, web pages whatsoever, and everyone has half an hour on top in the day where we do stupid stuff. It's not, I'm not saying cut down your coffee breaks with your colleagues or friends, whatever, but make them maybe 10 minutes shorter, or don't look so much on New York Times or whatever, or YouTube videos. We all do random stuff like that, and if we dedicate half an hour a day to science communication, I think a lot is done. But obviously, if you have children, if you have to work over hours, and for other reasons, it's not that easy. And I think I can only run 3 podcasts because I don't have children, and my job is very flexible. So I think Sherry, Yiselamush, and me, we are aware of it, that not everyone can do it. But I think if anyone really wants to do it, everyone finds the 20 minutes in a day. Sherry, what do you say?
Yeah, it is, yes, time consuming, and you do have to become efficient, like Julius said. Now, I want to take, from my perspective, one of the things that I did when I started Science Communication Journal Club, I realized from experience, and I knew that this is not something that if I'm going to grow it and scale and have it any traction, I can't really do it on my own. That's why we are a team. So when I decided to start Science Communication Journal Club, I sent out a message on Twitter and said, I want to start a SciComm project. Who wants to collaborate with me? A few people came forward who are still part of our team, and some other people I approached because I knew them. And the reason I can do Science Communication Journal Club, aside my being a mother and liking to do other things and also teaching, is because I have collaborators. So you don't have to do it alone. You can be a group of scientists, just like the Open Box Science, they have got people together to help send the message of science out there. So you don't have to do it alone. Second, I want to echo something that I really like, this phrase that Michelle Obama said, and it's really true, is in that you don't have to be famous to make a difference. Science communication doesn't have to come in a huge platform where you have thousands of YouTube followers or a podcast followers or whatever. If you're passionate about science communication, you want to communicate, do it within your community. You probably have a Facebook page where you connect with your family members. If you just take the time and really understand how to effectively communicate science and communicate it with your own immediate community. Imagine with all the scientists that we have out there, if each of us communicated what we do, and the advantage of that is that our own community trusts us, because one of the most important aspects of effectiveness is the trust the audience puts in the messenger so they can receive their message. And if you have family members or community and communicate with them, if you can't manage a big, huge project, that's enough, because you don't have to be famous to make a difference. And if we all did that, little drops grows into an ocean.
That's nice. Yeah, so basically setting up a team, managing time, and I actually have, we are approaching to the end of this very interesting conversation that we are having. And I would ask you, Sherry, if you would have 30 seconds or 1 minute to speak, to motivate our our listeners, but I think you already did. I mean, this was a very nice phrase. So I don't know, do you want to speak something for 30 seconds more or something, or can I pass the word for the others? It was a really nice message.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna finish because I'm sure other people, Julius and Yiselamush, have also other things to say. I don't want to take the whole stage. Anyway, be kind to yourself. This is difficult. Don't expect yourself to become a huge national SciComm star. That's not the point. So again, you don't have to be famous to make a difference, and just start communicating your science with your grocery store clerk, with anybody who trusts you.
Nice, that's a good piece. So Julius, do you have like in 30 seconds, 1 minute, a last message to the ones that want to start with SciComm?
Yeah, I like Sherry's message. I support it as well very much. I think it comes down to self-awareness, and it comes down to patience. And if you want to grow something big or bigger, it takes time, and that's okay. But it does not need to be big for having an impact. And I think this is very, very key. And you don't need me, you don't need Sherry, don't need Yiselamush to actually do all these things. There is this webpage called www.google.com, and there you find anything. So if you don't know how to start a podcast, you go on, how do I produce a podcast? Enter. How do I make a banger Instagram post? It's all there. It's all at your fingertips. You're the ones to decide. And I wish you all the best of luck, who is listening here right now. And I'm sure Sherry, Yiselamush, and I, we are available if there's if you want to be an interaction, if you just need someone to give you courage or just say, hey, can you like my post? I'm definitely in for that, because all of us, and also you, the organizers, we all for supporting science. And I think there is a lot of opportunity to support each other. So thanks for having us. And that's my 30 seconds. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much for the last words. And I think I would like to hear from Yiselamush, some last message to the ones that want to start. If she can switch on her microphone, would be fine. Yeah, there she is.
Thank you all. It was a great time for me, frankly speaking. I will contact all of you. Just my last word is patience, and time is critical. Time is needed to just reach everywhere we like. And we should have to start, as Sherry said, we should have to start from the scratch. We don't have to need a large or to become popular at the time when we start. We should have to start from our community, because I started from my community first. So our work will become bigger, and will be announced for the international level. If we give time and work hard, we will reach everywhere we need. So we have to be patient. So this is my last word. Thank you.
Nice words. Yeah. So thank you very much. I think we had a very nice conversation here. We could manage a lot of topics, and we cover most of the things around social media and communication. And I think Juan wants to say something for ending this.
Yeah, I think first of all, thanks to Sherry, Julius, and Yiselamush, our great panelists. Give a round of virtual applause to them. And as Julius says, I think all of their info we have shared extensively on social media. I'm sure they'll be happy if you reach out if you need any advice. In respect of our panelists' time, and we also do have our second session coming up, which is directly related, that using social media to communicate science is coming up, and we have fantastic panelists, as you can see. We'll take 1 minute break since we're already on top of time. And thanks again to all the panelists for session one. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I hope everyone can hear me well, and we're going to start the session 2, and with the time, I think we're pretty good with time. I'm just gonna ask to the panelists as well, to Laura, as sharing with me the stage as a moderator to start our session. And this session is named, I think Juan very nicely added this saying, leveraging social media for science communication. So thank you so much for all that joined us today. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the people are on YouTube Live. And I will be starting just introducing my first, let's say, people that I got in touch, which is who is Mellanie Fontes Dutra. So Mellanie, thank you. Mellanie is assistant professor at the University of Sinus Valley, Unisinos in the southern Brazil. She has PhD in neuroscience from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, where I'm actually also from. And she's a science communicator at Rede Analise. I would like to just briefly give you the stage to add another information that you would like and introduce yourself briefly. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you very much, Rômulo. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good night. My name is Mellanie, as Rômulo said, and I graduated in biomedicine at Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. I have master's and PhD in neuroscience research with postdoctoral in biochemistry. I began to use social media for science communication at early 2020 when the cases of coronavirus started to grow in Brazil. And since then, I'm doing this science communication on Twitter mainly, but in other social media platforms. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and let's keep going.
Okay, great. Yeah, I hope that for Laura.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm going to introduce the other two speakers. So the first one is Dr. Arnaldo Diaz-Alvarez. He is the Assistant Dean for Diversity and Inclusion for the Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at UT Southwestern Medical Center. Dr. Diaz-Alvarez received his PhD degree in biochemistry from Texas A&M University. And after this, he completed his postdoctoral training in cancer pharmacology in the Blair Laboratory at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine. Arnaldo, welcome. And if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, we would be thrilled.
Well, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Rômulo and Open Box Science for the opportunity and the platform. I'm a true believer of social media and how we can use social media to make an impact in the world. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm from Puerto Rico. So I am happy to also use social media to impact our communities.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Patrícia Rodil. She has a master's degree in molecular biology from IPCIT and is a biotechnologist from the University of Querétaro, both in Mexico. She is part of the executive committee of All Biotech and has participated in the MIT Community Bio Summit. In 2020, she founded the community Científicas Mexicanas, which brings together more than 18,000 women scientists from all areas of knowledge, and started a PhD to study the influence of microRNAs in the development of type 2 diabetes. Patty, welcome. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, please?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Well, yes, I'm studying my PhD. I had a startup after my master's, and then I decided to go back to academia. And now, well, I volunteer my time in this big community called Científicas Mexicanas. That's a community for women scientists in Mexico. And we have science outreach platforms in the biggest social media in Mexico, which are Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So that's a bit of my background. And I also have, well, my personal accounts in these media where I do a little bit of science communication. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And at last, I am, as Rômulo already said, I'm Laura Diaz-Alvarez. I'm also Mexican. And I do science communication mostly through Twitter. You can find me at Inmunounicornio. And yeah, we are just going to start the session by asking a question directly to Mellanie about the audience paradigm. So Mellanie, what approaches do you consider successful to connect with followers or audience, and how do you find what they want to hear?
Thank you very much, Laura. Well, personally, I like to create content that brings pop culture elements such as GIFs or images related to the information I'm sharing. I receive a lot of feedbacks like, oh, I saw this GIF from a TV show I watched it in your thread, and I was curious what the hell this GIF is doing there. So it was pretty nice to know that, because I think it is a way to connect with the audience. It also breaks the formality of the content, turning to something more like conversation about an interesting or relevant topic. There are many ways we can connect with people, but I like to bet on ways that we can create bonds and become more familiar to each other, you know? So I like to do my SciComm in this model, investing in these bonds with my audience.
Fantastic.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks very much. Arnaldo, how do you connect with your audience?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And the way that I use social media is to share my path. And so I'm a first generation student from a low income background in a small town in Puerto Rico. And I didn't have mentors to guide me through the process. So and it was challenging, as we all know, getting a doctorate degree. So and not having steps to follow, I made it one of my priorities to share my paths in a way that I'm inspiring others and I'm connecting with others, and I make it in a way not easier because it's challenging, but in a way that, I mean, give them hope that they can also attain a degree. So I am a scientist, so I do share content in terms of, like, you know, how to be successful in grad school, how to identify a mentor, how to pick a project, how to do your qualifying exams, and how to, you know, sometimes, I mean, navigate difficult conversations, I mean, with PIs and colleagues. So it is a way that I use the platforms. How to connect with people is, you know, investing time. Dr. Mellanie, I mean, says, like, you know, it's creating content. So what are you putting out there and how this is impacting others? But that takes time. Takes time for you to review, to read, to inform, to educate yourself, and before you start, like, putting content out. And I think, I mean, I also like to celebrate others. So I take the time, you know, to go to other people's account, read about them, celebrate them, highlight them, empower them. And I think that's how I have found my niche in social media. And I think, but then it's how I can connect people. So for me, building my network is a way to build somebody else's network. So I mean, on my social media and Twitter, you can see one of my posts that is, like, you know, the beauty of the network is how you can use this to empower others. And that's what I'm doing. Is just sharing my path, just to, in a way, to potentially impact somebody else. And that is really nice.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, both like being an inspiration and also kind of a mentor, let's say. That's amazing. Thank you. Thanks very much. So, Patty, what is the one thing you consider essential when posting about topics as complex as the scientific ones? Talking about like reaching to the audience.
Yes, so I agree with a lot of the things that already Mellanie and Arnaldo said. I think for me it is very important to, what we do in Científicas Mexicanas is that we would like to put the visibility on the scientists, on the women scientists. So it's not about me or about a small group of people, but about a lot of work that a lot of people is doing through Mexico and also in other countries where Mexican scientists are based. So I think we cheat a little with this because we have a big community, very, very big community. So what we do is that we ask them and we have this, I think we usually think about social media in a way in which we are creating and sharing content. So we have this fan page in Facebook and we have Twitter accounts where we create the content and then we share it. But there are also other forms to connect, and these are groups. For example, in Facebook you can create groups. So you are not the one who is creating the content, but it's the whole community is creating the content. And then if you go there, you can see actually what they want to know, what they want to share. And it's, I think in the last session, they were talking about creating a group of, if you can have a group of people that can help you and you can work together. And I think that's what we have been trying to create. So I think when you have a lot of minds thinking about how to share things, it's easier. And because you also have this diversity and also how people see the content. So I can create a content, I can think this is so easy to understand because I work in this area. And then you share it with all the other people that is working with you before you put it out there. And they say, okay, no, so because I have a different background, I'm a biologist, for example, but there are other people in my team that are engineers or they are physicists or I don't know, in different areas. And they say, okay, so that's not so easy to understand. So you can then you can change and you can adjust the content so it's easier for everyone. I think it's important to create conversations within your work group and also with the people that it's following you, and not thinking, okay, so I'm a scientist, I know more, I am expert in this area. More of, okay, so what are you understanding? And so I'm not explaining this well enough so for you to understand. So I have to change my language. No, I don't have to change the audience. I have to change the way I communicate. So I think that's a lot of what we do.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So Mellanie, talking about how we communicate this, well, science in general and the particularities of how science works, what would you think that a successful approach is, or what does it look like to be successful communicating science like complex topics?
Well, I totally agree with Patty about this conversation that is important to have with your audience. I guess it needs to be a bi-directional speaking. The people should be an active part in this communication, so we can have all these important feedbacks to improve our content and to select what contents people want to hear, wants to consume, and to share with your own network, particular network on social media. I think it is very important and critical to have a supportive network because we might suffer a lot of attacks during during the communication process, but this supportive network also helps us to spread more our content, to reach more people, different people from our particular network. So I guess there isn't a successful way to communicate, but we have instead many ways that we can do that. And the best way is where we can share this conversation horizontally, that people that is talking to us are seeing us as one of regular people in society, because scientists is just as human, as individual as any person in a society. Is much more about sharing and building together than a teaching lesson that is performing on social media or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. We all have our regular lives outside the lab. I think we all enjoy going to the cinema or having a burger or whatever, right? So, well, talking about engagement with the audience, Arnaldo, could you share a funny or exciting moment that you have experienced involving your followers or specific content?
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I think one key, one important thing is that we sometimes forget is like, know your audience, right? First, when I'm invited to do something, I take the time to get to know the audience. So you can, put the information or in a way that you're going to make an impact. So something that happened to me, a few years ago, I post a lot about first gen on topics, and I was invited for a keynote speech based on Twitter. So I think this is a potential. This is an amazing platform. To put your work out there, to inspire others. And I was invited to deliver a keynote speech at a conference for community college students. And it was amazing. It was amazing how I was able to connect with students, and then I brought students to my programs and to do research during the summer. So that's a good way to go share your story, connect, but then also have like a plan to help others. So in that experience was important. It was such a small group of students, but the impact is huge. And now I'm part of like the advisory board for that program back at that university in another state. So based on Twitter, I'm posting. As I think Mellanie mentioned, Twitter could also, be challenging. Any social media platform, because you're putting yourself out there, you're being vulnerable, and that opened the doors. To others, to comment, right, and opinions. And I'm all about celebrating opinions and comments and people. So, but it is important to understand that when you're putting yourself out there, so you have to be ready. To keep moving forward and keep impacting. So for me, it's about creating an impact. And Twitter have helped me. And one specific event is that one that I got an invitation to be a keynote for community college students.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. So, well, talking about this outreach to the audience and how you connect with them, what do you think a perfect post or the perfect content should look like?
So perfect content, there's not such a thing. I can spend sometimes hours crafting the best tweet and it had 3 likes. And then I'm like, oh my God. And sometimes you just post something on the go and it have like 1,000+ likes and retweets. So I think it's like, as long as what you're putting out there is honest and is based on whatever you're doing, right? In my case, it's about mentoring and supporting and engaging and empowering. So all my content is around those topics. So as long as you're okay with what you're putting out there and you're fine with the content that you're creating, at the end of the day, the only person that you have to satisfy is yourself. So that's key. I mean, you have to be the one happy. And sometimes, I mean, we start comparing ourselves with others, right? We start looking, oh my God, that person went viral with a tweet and I did. And so if you start doing that, then you're detracting. I mean, from who you are. So the important is like to be yourself, put it out there. It will resonate with people. Then Twitter is on every platform. You know, there are specific times of the day, specific days of the week, and specific niche. I mean, of people that. So it's if you're fully. I mean, this could be like a full-time job, right? And it's a full-time job for many content creators out there. But it's like, don't take it personal. Just remember that your priority should be yourself.
Thank you. So, Mellanie, perfect post or not perfect post?
I agree with Arnaldo. There's not such a thing. You should have fun when you're communicating science. I personally have fun doing science. So when I communicate about science, I'm also having fun. And I think that it's so challenging to achieve more people, to build your audience, and there's many factors that can demotivate you during this process. So it has to be fun. You need to be excited and celebrating the little victories during this process and sharing with your network that. Because when you do that, you are amplifying all these good feelings of doing something different. I totally agree with Arnaldo that in the end of the day, you have to be happy and satisfied of what you've done during the day, during the week, in your activities. So I'm totally agree with him.
Sure, of course. Thank you. So, Patty, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you. Well, I agree. There's no perfect post, and what we do in Científicas Mexicanas is that, well, one thing that I would like to say is that there's a lot of great and amazing content of science communication in English, but it's so harder to find in other languages. So we in Científicas Mexicanas, and I personally, we have all of content is in Spanish, because that's the audience and that's the people that we're looking to reach. But it's hard because there's not we don't have the background that we don't have a lot of resources that are for the English audience, right? So what we do, and I think this is important because in different platforms you have, as already Arnaldo and Mellanie said, we have different times, and then you have different formats, and then in some platforms it's easier for people to share content like images, for example, or videos. And in others, such as Twitter, for example, sometimes it's easier with threads, and so you have to write a lot. So it's very different how people engage with the content. We also have a podcast and we have a blog in Científicas Mexicanas. So what we do is we have like kind of an inventory of all the content, because sometimes, as Arnaldo said, you create this content and it's great, but then people is not interested in that moment. But a few months later, then you say, oh, they are talking about something that I already have content on. So you don't have to create new content every time. Sometimes you can just bring it back and say, okay, so now we're talking, I don't know, about mental health in academia, and we have a lot of content about that. So when this becomes a discussion, we already have a lot of things to bring back. And also, I think when you're doing this outreach, like personal outreach, I think we can also do that. We can also have a little inventory. I have a little inventory of the tweets or the threads in my Twitter that people like a lot. And sometimes these topics come back, and they come back after a few months again and again. So I just bring the content back, and if I see something different, then I create something new, and then I add it to my inventory. So I think this kind of gives you a little bit of relief to have to be creating content all the time, because you know you have a lot of things that are valuable. And sometimes people just don't see it in the moment. So you just have to take it back when it's the right moment for the audience. So yeah, that's what would.
Awesome. Yeah, I really like the thing that you said about inventory, because then it connects to me as likely with Yiselamush. She has this, she is a host of a radio host. And then it's very different, because you go there, you record, and then you have the inventory. But there's something that I found quite, compared to this, of course, there's a completely different strategy, as we were also mentioning before. There is something that you are really facing, and I would like to address this slightly. I think that would be very important nowadays, is that when you're not just scientists in ScienceCom, but also you're became then naturally digital influencers. So nowadays, we know that our generations and the future generations in the modern world will be preferring to look at their phones instead of maybe things that are curated, like the TV or the radio. But at the other side, then you're hearing, for example, lots of messages, you receive lots of comments. And then I would like to address this big concept that it's really becoming a trend, at least in Brazil, that I can follow, and maybe you can comment specifically in your niches, which is the altruism. So is this a Greek term for exclusion from society or group? Or you say that's temporary banishment, like sometimes it was not really intentionally, or maybe engaged in something that was not so cool. So I'd like you to comment. Maybe you can start with Arnaldo. Have you experienced situations like that, and how do you deal with, for example, canceling or a bit of not very much, let's say, enjoy questions or answers or comments in your posts?
So that's an important topic that I'm glad that we are, taking the time to address. Social media is a platform that, as I said before, you're putting yourself out there. And there'll be opinions, and there'll be different opinions, and diversity is about differences in opinions as well. So it's important that we listen, and and just you engage in topics that you have something to add. I engage in everything related to mentorings. I get direct messages, questions, and sometimes there's differences in opinion, and that's okay. That's okay. But what's not okay is when it becomes an attack. And it's important for you to prioritize your well-being, your mental health. And if it's something that is affecting you as an individual, you have all the right to disengage from that content, or disengage from the specific individuals. Social media is also a platform in where you can do it at your own pace. There's some of us that are there like every day, but there's times that you have to take time for yourself and take a break. And it's important that you always prioritize your well-being. And if that means taking time off social media, if that means unfollow, if that means muting, you have to do what's best for you. And that's what's important. But yes, things like that happen, Rômulo.
Perfect. Yeah, I will then move to the words to Mellanie.
Thank you, Rômulo. I think it's an important topic to discuss. As social media gains more attention as a place where we can follow each other, follow people and share opinions and analysis, the responsibility of what we post or tweet is higher. I can speak for myself. Here in Brazil, we saw coordinated attacks from these anti-science and anti-vax groups against science communicators, scientists, and experts. We saw some contents posted in the past being used against people in the present, even if we have different positions about this matter today. I saw many colleagues being canceled or disrespected for some things about themselves or random things they shared years ago, as if it was their current thoughts. I saw people as it was related to mental health shared by one science communicator to disqualify this one. So this is very complex. I saw a lot of hate and threats directed to colleagues just because they were asking people to take more careful actions during the pandemic time. So I totally agree with Arnaldo again. How can we deal with these attacks? I strongly recommend giving yourself some space and distance from social media when it happens. Take a few moments, days away from your account to digest what happened and focus to yourself on your mental health. Always put it in the first place, always. Build a supportive network for helping you to cope with this moment. Science communication is about doing together and cooperatively. So we need to stick together, especially during these harsh times that we can pass through this communicating process.
Fantastic. Yeah, Patty, you also have probably words to say on this.
Yes, thank you. I think this is so important, and it is especially for me because the reason actually that I started Científicas Mexicanas as a community, and then we moved to these platforms to do public outreach, is because I received attacks and harassment in social media before for talking about women in science. So
look at that.
One important thing that I would like to say is that women are more likely to receive attacks and harassment in social media, especially professional women. When you're sharing about something that you're an expert, then it's probably that you receive more attacks, and these attacks will not be about your work, but about yourself. And there are many misogynistic and very harsh attacks on women. And if we combine this with racism, homophobia, and other phobias in general, it is very difficult to deal with it. But I think that we have the right to share our side. And I think it's very important to say for everyone that's a POC or everyone that's in a minority, that it is important for you to be in social media, because it is important for you to share what you have to say and what you're doing and your work, and it is important. So I think that's
lovely.
Yeah, that's the message.
I would say that in the end, we must not be in silence. Things will come, but then it's a beautiful words when you are now on Mellanie. You get together with your community, and then yes, you were there exposed. So you're literally being into this mode of digital influencer, as I said. And then I would like to follow a bit of well, sometimes the lifestyle, it's a content. You particularly are producing content based on science. Maybe Arnaldo would like to comment a bit more into this. But in the other side, there is, I would like to know how much is this level of our stories, our retweets have to be, how is literally the limit or the barrier between being a persona and being a scientist that likes to talk about science? Is how do you really manage this? Is it okay? It's fine, because then brings what Mellanie said, brings a bit of bond, connects with people, not just sharing science, but sharing maybe, you know, a place that you like, your favorite food or favorite music and so on. So what do you think about this? Is it fine? Is it not? Or because it's from the origin of being a scientist, it's a really term that brings, you know, a bit of a serious person that, you know, talks about science and with glasses and talk very serious matters. Yes, so I would like to address this a bit. Yeah, exactly. 3 of us, the four of us, just Mellanie, it's without the glasses, you see. we're already in the stereotype.
Yeah, but I think vulnerability is a superpower. I mean, being vulnerable, I mean, you can, I mean, impact so many. I mean, every stage I go, I always say I'm a first generation, I mean, student from small town in Puerto Rico. I'm also disabled in STEM. So I share, I mean, but you share as much as you want. I mean, this is very personal. It took me some years to share, I mean, that I'm 100% deaf through one of my ears. So because it is personal, and I didn't want people to judge me based on that. But I mean, I decided that, you know, people always have something to say, regardless. So I say, you know, I'm doing this, I feel comfortable doing this, and I know I'm empowering others by sharing. So, but you do it at your own pace, right? I mean, at the right time as well. And knowing that, you know, when you put yourself out there, you know that opinions will come. And so it's important that we never lose focus of our, you know, what's our mission and why we're doing this, and be responsible, as Mellanie said early on, like be responsible of the content that you're putting out there. I mean, and it's important, I mean, that we keep doing this and we keep supporting each other, because sometimes it's challenging. And now we are an international group of scholars here connected, right? So now is nurturing these relations, I mean, to empower others. I want to let Patty know that on Sunday nights, there's a group of Latinx scientists that comes together to talk in Spanish about, I mean, science and careers. And so, I mean, I'll send you the details, because it'd be awesome, I mean, to hear more about your missions and your programs and how we can connect. I mean, and that's the beauty of this. I don't know any of you, but the fact that we're connected on the same topic is empowering, and we should do more of this.
Perfect, amazing. So I will follow to, let's say, to my last question. It's regarding whether it's everyone, let's say a 1 million question. And we have been noticing, I think everybody, it's regarding the digital algorithm. And well, the algorithm that we normally say on the daily basis is actually related to what it's called the feed algorithm. So I would like to know from your perspectives, for example, is it really possible to use the algorithm in ways to really share proper, curated content about science and general topics around scientific knowledge? For example, vaccines, can be any other disease. Instead of the person will be encountering perhaps something that's not going to be helpful and going to bring more confusion, but also at the moment that you put, for example, in the Google, maybe will appear something in Spanish or in Portuguese or in English, it doesn't matter, in a mother tongue language, and help them to really understand basically the content and so on, because basically we use this now as a tool of research. So you think this is really feasible? Do you have also thoughts about it? It really happens, yes or no? Patty, you that are maybe can start commenting about it.
Yeah, well, I think it is. I think it is possible. I think it's hard. It's difficult sometimes for us because we are not experts in social media and algorithms and you know, marketing and stuff like this. So when you start sharing content in these platforms, you have to learn how they work, so you can leverage and use that for your advantage. But I think there's this study, I don't remember where it was published, but it was in Facebook, and they took the most followed science fan pages in Facebook, and they found that first of all they reached millions, but I mean, I think more than 30 million people were following these science pages, and almost 40% of the posts were about new discoveries in science, and the one that were have more engagement and were shared were about events, like conferences and stuff, but not like academic conferences, but for the public, where people were able to participate. So I think people is interested, and if we actually create, we listen to the audience and we engage in these conversations and we understand what they're looking for, then we will be able to successfully share the content that we want. But if we, like you said, I think all of us, we do this like aside stuff from our jobs or studies, but there is and that's, I think it's very important to participate, but if we actually want to understand the algorithm and the social media and everything, and people who actually do this for a living, that's their main job, I think understanding how it works is important, and I think it's possible, and we can participate in it, even if we don't, have to understand everything. Well, we can share and we can cooperate and collaborate with people who actually knows it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Fantastic. Mellanie or Arnaldo would like to comment a bit more about it? Okay. So I will then move my words to Laura, and Laura will deal with our last topic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rômulo. Yeah, well, something that caught my attention was that everyone mentioned mental health. So I think we can all agree that mental health and health in general has been very, like, it has been impacted during the pandemic. So I think probably one of the things that would be like the most helpful in reaching out to the audience would be help them with their mental health. So do you think, Arnaldo, that we are still on baby steps regarding the use of social media as a tool to effectively help people improve their health, especially their mental health?
So I think we're always baby stepping everything because everything keeps changing and it's so different. Some people, we have to keep learning. Mentors are also mentees, right? We have to keep learning. We have to keep taking time to educate ourselves, keep growing, things keep changing. It's a great platform to reach like the community at large. So I think it's a fantastic platform. Mental health for someone like me coming from a really small town, mental health was not even a word. Nobody talked about it. So it's important that, we use this platform also to educate. Not define, it's more to educate and next steps and create that, trying to create that, idea that this is something that should be discussed. This is something that should never be out of the table. All programs should have components to help. All companies, industries, everything, should take this into account because this is important. And I always say, like, investing in your community will just, empower your organization. And I think that mental health is a component that we should all, keep learning. And we're always, these platforms keep changing monthly. There's new, Twitter Spaces is powerful. So this keep growing. And so we have to keep learning.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So Mellanie, what do you think about this? You talked about taking care of your mental health as a science communicator, but what do you think? Do you think the science communicator can help their audience to take care of their own mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can share many contents about that, highlighting the importance of a mental health doing a post-graduating program or doing your master's, your PhD, which is very important to share and to improve this conversation, the discussion inside and outside the academy. But I like to focus here in general health because as I perform a lot of science communication during the pandemic time, inside the COVID-19, I saw how much this improve the way people see the pandemic and the way they could improve your own care during this period. I also shared to Rômulo incredible research from Science Post by Núcleo Jor here in Brazil that revealed how science communication filled a void of information during COVID-19 pandemic inside social media. So this has a great, promising future from here to future days, because as we see more science communicators and scientists on social media, I believe that we will be also getting science closer to society, stimulating people to use scientific evidence for better decisions for their health and other issues. So I think science communication has a critical role inside of all of this, and this could be applied in many matters, in many ways, such as mental health or the engagement during a health crisis as we are facing currently. So I think absolutely, Laura, it's very promising, and I saw a beautiful future on that if we could cooperate on that together and doing it together as a huge network of people from different countries, from different locations, but focusing in get people more closer to science in all the ways inside your routines and your daily actions.
Of course, yeah, definitely. The more the better, right? So yeah, I agree that well, Patty had already said that many heads and many brains coming together, it's better. So would you like to comment on this, Patty? What would you think is the future of science communication? Does it include many collaborations with not just scientists from your own country, but from other countries?
Yes, I think, and very quickly, yes, I think we can connect with the audience. And while we do science communication in social media, we will also find other scientists. And there we can create, like, well, this is happening right now, we can create a lot of collaborations. I have to say, I actually found my tutor committee for my PhD in Twitter, and they're amazing. They are amazing people that are helping me a lot. And I think what I see in the future is this: we can have diversity, we can have collaboration, and we will see, I think, more people joining social media and sharing their work in social media. So we will see different opinions and different point of views and different things. We have been used to, I think, in history to listen to only a few voices. And I think social media is allowing us to listen to a lot more voices and a lot more people. And I think that's the place that we're going. At least that's what we're looking for, and I'm very looking forward to it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I really like this.
We are all very looking for the future. And you talked about something that it's actually Arnaldo's topic, which is diversity. So I would like to invite Arnaldo to comment on this. So how does diversity enriches science communication?
Oh, in many in many ways. I mean, from the topics of, I mean, research, right? And the communities that have been impacted by, I mean, different, I mean, diseases. I mean, the research interest of the scientists will be in a way sometimes influenced by their communities, right? So the more diverse the teams are, the more, I mean, yeah, it might be more, I mean, kind of like uncomfortable conversations, but that's how you grow, right? By putting yourself out of your comfort zone. I think the more diverse the teams are, the more diverse the research topics are, and the broader the community you're impacting. So, I mean, there's such a beauty. I mean, I mean, just look at this room. I mean, we have Brazil, Mexico, Puerto Rico. And we're in different parts of the world. So this is diversity, and this is the beauty. So now I'm already thinking how we can connect, what else we can do next to keep empowering. I mean, yes, diversity is really strong. I mean, and it will push us out of our comfort zone. I mean, it will, and when you're out of your comfort zone is when you start growing, right? And when you start figuring out things that you didn't even know existed before. I mean, growing up, I didn't know, I mean, what a scientist was, and I didn't know. And then when I knew what a scientist was, I thought it was just biology and chemistry. And so, I mean, it's like the more we can come together and bring different, I mean, point of views, because diversity is also different points of views. I mean, we can, I mean, move, I mean, forward, I mean, in a way that is going to, I mean, impact, I mean, the world, and understand that this is not just a one-time event. This is not a one-time workshop. This is an ongoing process. And it's a learning process. It's educating ourselves. It's keep growing. I mean, when you stop learning, is when things, I mean, go the wrong way, right? But it's about, I mean, getting out of the comfort zone, empower yourself, get out of the comfort zone again, and keep impacting people as you go. I think that's the beauty of diversity, and I think we have to do more.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks very much. That's a very inspiring message. So, well, about messages, I'm going to ask each of you for some final words. So whatever you want to say to our audience, this is it. This is the time. So Patty, please.
Well, I want to thank you, everyone. Thank you, OpenBox. Thank you for everyone who was in the session. And well, I would like to say only that welcome to social media. I look forward to seeing you there, listen to your voice, and connect and move forward together, as Arnaldo said. And thank you.
Thank you. Mellanie.
Well, I'd like to thank you, all the moderators, all the panelists. It was a great pleasure to share this moment with you all, and I hope we can share a lot of moments in the next opportunities. I really hope to see more initiatives on science communication, groups, networks working together to achieve more people in cooperative ways. Partnerships with influencers might be something we will see more frequently, as we saw during COVID-19 and how helpful it was. So independently, I see this promising future if we work together and cooperatively. And I think we did today is a beautiful quick start to continue improving and doing that in this beautiful way, as Arnaldo brilliantly said. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Arnaldo?
First, I mean, thank you, Rômulo. Thank you, Laura, for the opportunity. Thank you, Open Box Science. A pleasure to meet Mellanie and Patty. And here, just remember, I mean, to be yourself, prioritize your well-being, keep learning, and just share as much as you want on your own terms, right? And then you'll see how far you'll go. and how many people. If you can just impact one individual, that's huge. And the more that we can do that, the more we can move in the right direction. It's about keep learning and also like be accountable, understand, I mean, be responsible of the content that you're putting out there. And also, I mean, learn from your mistakes. Failures are not an end stop. Failure is just a moment to reflect, learn, and keep moving forward. So with that, thank you for the opportunity.
Fantastic.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Me and Laura, we're very glad to contact you. It's so inspiring, and we'll be even more motivated now to post things that can reach, as Arnaldo said, just at least perhaps one person. Even maybe my mom will be the first one to like it, my post, but then it's already perfect, and I can have her support, and then we move forward. So now I would like to thank to you, to Laura, for working with me so collaboratively, and I'm super glad to be with you guys. And now we're gonna move to our next session. So then our team is gonna just share some of the slides for next session, and then see you soon, maybe in 3-4 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so I think almost 6, we are in our last session. Now it's with me, Albrecht. I would like to again say a few words about me. So I am naturally from Brazil, working here in Germany, doing my PhD here in microbiome. And I would say from now on, I'm enthusiastic in science communication. Then I would like to leave to Albrecht to introduce himself.
Hello, also welcome everyone that's listening and watching. I'm Albrecht. I'm a PhD student in neuroscience at the moment. I have been working on my PhDs for 3 years now, and I'm actually really interested in getting into science communication once I'm done with my PhD. So I'm really happy to be able to be your second moderator here for this session.
Thank you, Albrecht. So today in this session, we're going to talk about communication career for scientists. And I am personally thrilled to be among them because they have so much experience, and you're going to have lots of things to talk, and you're going to have lots of inputs as well. So we'll start presenting Trity Pourbahrami. I hope I said properly. So Trity is an international communications leader with degrees in physics, physiology, social welfare, and public administration. Currently, she is a science communications officer at Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. Before joining to the science philanthropy sector, she was the higher education sector, where she taught science communication and lead strategy communications efforts. Please, Trity would like to say some few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with all of you, and I'm excited. We're going to have a nice panel focusing on careers.
Thank you.
So with us today is also Rebecca Winkels, who is the Director of the Communications and Strategy at Wissenschaft im Dialog and has been working in science communications for the past 10 years. She holds degrees in biology and science journalism and is currently working on her PhD in science communication. Rebecca, do you also want to say a couple of words?
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Happy to share some thoughts on science comm as well. It makes me feel really old that I'm in SciComm for 10 years now.
Okay, fantastic. So I would like to introduce also one of our panelists, Aines. Amy is a communication strategist, speaker coach, and former telecommunication industry executive who teaches scientists at universities and government agencies how to engage listeners, build productive relationships, and make a bigger impact with their work. She's a CEO of a communications consultant firm that she founded in 1999 and author of Champion Science, Communicating Your Ideas to Decision Makers, a book that based on her 4 decades of experience work with scientists and technologists in wireless, tech, and biotech industry. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much. You're muted, sorry.
Happy to be here. And Rebecca, now you know that you don't have to feel old. I've had a long career and it's exciting to have a chance to be with this great group to talk about it today.
And as the last panelist, we also have Márcia Duarte. She's a Portuguese scientist. She did her PhD in microbiology at the Technical University of Braunschweig in Germany, and then turned Associate Director of Scientific Communications in a pharmaceutical company, namely Novartis in Basel, Switzerland. And after 15 years of working in scientific research and championing at scientific communications competitions, for example, FameLab, her passion for communication led her to career change in 2017. And today we will explore how she did the transition also. Márcia, do you have also a couple of words?
Just to thank for the invitation and say how proud and happy I am to be in this amazing group of women speakers. I'm sure that I'm going to learn a lot during this session and looking forward to all the questions.
Thank you very much for introducing yourself. For the audience, as with the same with the last sessions, you can write, if you have any questions, you can write them in YouTube and we'll ask them throughout the sessions. And first, we wanted to talk about how to actually get into scientific communications. For that, Márcia was nice enough to share her story how she actually got into the field. And she was applying to Novartis. And when she applied, she wrote her contact number wrong. And then at the day of the interview, 10 minutes after it was supposed to start, she received an email informing her that the contact number was wrong. And in the end, she ended up sending her correct number and corrected joke that for a communication interview, it looks like she did not start with her best foot forward and made then the best out of the remaining 15 minutes. And in the end, she got the job, which is amazing. And the failure did not define her. And it's about what she did with it. And in this case, it showed that she could keep it together under a stressful situation and was able to play with the situation to her advantage. It made her very more memorable to them. And Márcia, this is how literally you got into scientific communications, but would you mind also sharing what the trigger was to make the switch, and also how the things went after you got the job actually?
So I was always that kind of curious kid that never went through the phase of keep asking why. That's just me. And although I was an academic science nerd, and I say that in the most loving way, for 15 years, at 35, I decided to apply to communications in pharma company, and literally all my friends and peers thought I lost my marbles. and why I would do a career change from academia to corporate, from core science to communications. And I must say that the trigger was not one particular moment, it was like a buildup of little things that made me happy, that took me to the point where I thought I'm more happy doing these little things than actually my day job. And by little things, I meant doing whiteboard animations to explain a complex concept in science, doing social media communications for the institute where I was working, going to FameLab, which basically is a science competition where you have to explain in 3 minutes with props you can bring on stage your science in a way that even your grandmother would understand. And I would do all of those efforts during my weekends, after my long days in the lab. And I started realizing that one, I was more happy doing those things than I was doing in the lab. So I liked more the part of communicating science than actually doing it. And two, I was actually good at it. So I thought that that was a buildup of little triggers that led to the moment where I just got the courage to do the shift. And then doing the shift, it's not easy, and we can talk about it. I'm sure some questions will pop up, but it's about not being afraid to make a lateral step or even a step backward to then give a few forward. So you've just mentioned the story that I should stop sharing, the story that embarrassed my own start in the career, but it is true. I just applied, and that job was a temporary job, a 9-month job, which most people that maybe have experience in the field would not be interesting or not even would be attractive to them. And for me, I saw it as an opportunity to put my feet in and get the experience and understand what the job would be. And since I got that job, which was in global drug development, I was doing communications for a team of scientists. So it was a bit of a soft launch because I knew the way they speak. I know how to communicate with them. And it was about helping them to communicate beyond their scientific structure. It's a huge company. You need to be able to talk with people in commercial, with other functions within the company. And that's where they would struggle. And since that was my passion of how do we digest that kind of information and we share with others, that was a good moving in. And since I joined the company 5 years ago, I've already changed roles like 3 or 4 times, because I'm still finding what it means to do communications within a big company. So what it started in drug development, then I've done executive communications where you help senior management to do their communications internally and externally. And now I found what I think it's my niche, which is scientific communications within the global medical affairs function that is more towards educational materials. So it has been a bumpy road. It's never like a straight line that you know you are in point A and you're going to get to point B. It's all about the journey. And I will stop here.
That is really a wonderful journey and a path that you took. And congratulations on that. Also, Trity, you also started with a scientific background. So what was the trigger for you to switch to communications, and would you like to tell us a bit more about the path that you took?
Sure. Let me first say, right on, Márcia. That's exactly what I would say, that it's not a straight path. It's not just one turn that leads you to science communication. In retrospect, going back 20 years, I'm like, oh yeah, this is where I should have been. But I didn't know that 20 years ago. My whole life, I have been a boundary spanner. What do I mean by that? I come up with an understanding of 2 different worlds and I try to bring them together. Whether it's because of the multi-languages that I speak, because of the multiple countries that I've lived in, the multiple, you mentioned my variety of degrees. I think I'm pretty much the only one who has a social welfare degree and a physics degree, right? So I'm a boundary spanner, right? I like this approach to life and bringing different worlds together. I also am a natural extrovert. You know, I draw my energy from people. It's really hard to be in 2D right now for me. And I realize that when I walk into a room as a scientist, I gain some level of respect that allows me to be a trusted messenger. And that allows me to broaden the message of science. And I fell in love. I thought, that's it. That's what I want to do. Also, life plays a big role around. So when I finished grad school, both my husband and I finished grad school, and we were like, okay, we know we have to move, right, to establish ourselves. What is a career that can move with you and you can kind of take your expertise in different spaces? And science communication has been that for me, and I'm grateful. So my preparation and the opportunities that presented themselves led to this great marriage of making the world a better place through communication.
That's also really a nice story how you got there. And yeah, I can understand that especially in science, where you basically move to position, and it can take you around the world, that you look for something that might actually move with you. That's a really nice story. Also, we have Rebecca, who also slightly started in science. What made you actually change from science to a more communication-centered career?
Well, I switched a lot earlier than these two, so that should be the disclaimer here, because I did a bachelor's degree in biology and I hated almost everything about it and was terrible at it, apart from when I started actually being able to do my bachelor thesis, which was lab work, which I absolutely loved. But the way biology courses, at least at that time, so ages ago, as we've established that I'm really, really old. Ages ago, it was the way that it was very much learning by heart, studying stuff, and then vomiting that stuff out onto a paper. And that was a biology degree. And I was not made for that. I was interested in the science aspects. I was interested in asking questions in a way similar to you, Márcia. I think I am someone who always asks questions to anyone. So I really like that. And I was fortunate enough to have some friends who were pointing out to me that while I had an offer to do a fast-track PhD at a Max Planck Institute, that they don't see me there. And I'm very grateful for those friends, because I didn't see myself there. The offer came to me, and obviously in my CV talks now, I make it sound like I then was really happy about it and moved on to science communication. I literally cried when I got the offer, which isn't the impulse you should have when you get an offer from Max Planck to work for them. I realize that now. So I basically looked at what I was good at and what I wanted to do. And I decided to take a year off of uni and do internships in science communication and science journalism. Because I had always written part-time. I was a part-time soccer coach. So I used to write for sports papers and stuff like that. I always enjoyed that. I always enjoyed communicating. And I thought I could maybe make a career from that, having no idea if I could, or if that even existed as a career, to be honest. So yeah, I started doing internships for a year and then realized after 2 weeks that that's what I wanted to do. And it just made me really happy and really cheerful person all of a sudden. And then I decided to look around and see how you can actually become a science journalist, which was the idea at the time. And I got into a program in London that focused on science journalism, and that was made up of people who had a bachelor's degree in a science subject and then added journalism onto it, which is very specific. And we haven't got anything like in Germany, which is a shame, because that was a brilliant program. We learned to be journalists with a knack for science in a way. And I found that perfect. And so, yeah, so I was really lucky to combine my interest in science with my possible lack of being able to concentrate on one thing for the entirety of my life and was able to make a job out of that. And it's very nice. It's it's not a very straightforward way either. And probably I can make it sound really straightforward, I promise you, but it's nothing like. It was just a bit of looking who I am, looking at what I really actually like doing and what I don't like to do and how I want to spend the rest of my life. And I'm quite fortunate that it worked out in the end. Could have left me unemployed, I think.
Well, it's really nice to see that also your way was wonderful in the end and brought you where you wanted to be. And the next question goes to Amy. You haven't been as deep in science as the other three panelists that we have here with us. So I wanted to ask you, do you have any tips for scientists out of the perspective of a communicator to make this first step for the transition?
Absolutely. And I think you've just heard some things from this group of very expert folks who found their way in some ways by accident. And the good news is that this is a career now. This is really something you can anchor toward and do. You heard about the importance of internships. I think that's key. The other thing that I want to say is that in the work that I do with scientists, I tap into what I see as the skills you already have that will make you a good science communicator. You already know how to do research. You already know how to experiment and analyze and observe. Those skills, if you just turn them a little bit, become really rocket fuel for a career in science communication. But you also have to make mindset shifts. And I know we'll chat about that in a little bit, but I just want you to recognize that you have those skills. And then the last point I want to make is to just echo the joy you see is what you should always pursue in your career. Do not stay in a job if you can't wake up every day being excited to go to work. I have loved every bit of what I do, every opportunity I've had to work with the people I've worked with. And I would have made a change if that weren't the case. You owe it to yourself. You do.
Thank you for the very amazing advice. Also, I wanted to ask the others a bit for what you would recommend new scientists to actually step into. Would you recommend any specific positions that are on a starter level, and where would you look for them? Rebecca,
I think one really important bit is to start doing it on the side. I know that's a bit annoying because you have so much other work, but I think, I think we can have a transparency disclaimer here for Márcia and myself, because she worked at the institute I started out as a press officer and I think the way you did it was perfect because while you were working as a scientist at the institute, you at the same time took every opportunity to communicate and try new things within communication. And I think that is very important if you want to find a job afterwards in communication, because you can show that you've got some experience. And it also helps you to see what kind of communication you actually like in a way. And it just makes it much easier to apply for entry-level positions, which is unfortunate that some of you still have to apply for entry-level positions when you have a PhD, which you shouldn't really be doing. But I think that's just the way it is. So my advice to anyone who wants to start out and switch careers or is thinking about it is don't hold back, try as much as you can during your time as a researcher.
Thank you very much. Márcia, do you want to also add something to that?
I think that most of the big ticket items were already covered by Amy and Rebecca, but I would just emphasize don't let the hurdles push you back. Don't let it stop you. You will hear things like academic work is not real work experience or real comms experience. You will say that people will highlight that in your CV you lack the formal education and training in communications. So back to the point of Amy, remember that scientists already have lots of qualities that are great for good communication. We know how to pass a clear message. Good scientists also know how to storytell. We know how to put a manuscript together. That's just a long version of a story. And all these kind of things help you in the world of communications. And if you start dipping in some of the opportunities that might pass across you, just take them. Then you will really know, do I like to do this even when I have to work really hard to prepare for something that is happening in 30 minutes? Maybe you'll get to the conclusion you don't like, or maybe you will get, like me, the conclusion, oh my God, I love it. And then that gives you traction and appetite to do more and more until, like Rebecca mentioned, you fill in the gaps of your CV, you start building a little portfolio of things you did. And suddenly, and finally, what I would say is when you're trying to apply for jobs in communication, tailor your CV and do your homework in preparation for interviews. Most of the times, my experience that nobody cared about those pages, long lists of publications. They want to know your soft skills, which so many times we forget how important they are. So tailor our CV. when you're applying for jobs of communication, and start putting those nuggets of volunteer work and great things that you've done along the work you do already as a scientist.
Fantastic. I would just like to jump into this topic that me and Albrecht and you as well, we are doing this volunteer work, and we are very glad to be connected with you. And you, Márcia, have a very good background about it. How it's really, what do you think from the perspective of paid tasks and volunteer work in the science communication point of view? Maybe after Amy can briefly comment about it.
You'd like me to? Okay. Yeah, that was how I got started. I volunteered working at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and the first article I wrote was about plasmapheresis. And I was a communication studies major, so that was my background. I knew nothing about plasmapheresis, but one of the things I loved about the work was I got to talk to experts. I got to learn from them. And then I had the opportunity to turn that into something to share with people to help them learn. So I'm a big believer in doing some side projects and volunteering your time, because if you don't have a communications background, you've got to demonstrate your capability, as Márcia said. So it's an absolute important step. And the other thing in today's world, because there's so much available, you can start building your own skills. There are so many ways, and I know there's a great list of resources that'll be included with this program, but there are so many places that you can get fabulous information. And if you want to learn these skills, you can begin to develop them as you go on your own, and demonstrating that when you're in an interview, showing the passion you have for the work you want to do is huge. And storytelling about it is a skill you can use while you're interviewing. So working to better your communication skills will enable you to be a better candidate and come across better in interviewing. It's well worth it.
Thank you very much for your words. Any of you would like to comment a bit more? But I also agree. I mean, for me, it's so exciting to do this works. I really enjoy to be, I'm particularly involved in public journal club initiatives with other Latin students. It's always very, very good to connect and build these soft skills that we may have to just polish a bit. And just going to this softer skills, Rebecca told us, I think she already mentioned this briefly, that she considered herself the worst biology student in the world, but a pretty good communicator. So Rebecca, what are the essential practices of a good science communicator?
Well, I think it's a bit different, because if I'm a scientist communicating, I need a different kind of skill set than if I'm a professional science communicator, because my kind of role in the sphere now is more setting a stage for science communicators. And I don't mean a literal stage, I mean creating room and spaces for interactions between parts of the public and segments of the public and scientists. So that's what I would define my role as. And you need different traits for that than you need to be a good communicating scientist. For a good communicating scientist, I think there are numerous skills you have to have, but the most important thing is that you have to kind of be able to think at least about your audience. I think there's no worth in science communication going out to the world without thinking about the audience. And I think if I learned something in the years I've done it now and I've talked about science communication, is that it's very important to know who you are speaking to and who you want to talk to and who you want to address. And that should be the number one thing, knowing your audience, and then you can choose your format, and then you can choose how you communicate, because that all kind of goes after the question, who do I want to reach and what do I want to achieve with my communication? So at least if you want to do it strategic, I think those are the two most important questions. Skill-wise, I think it's everyone can communicate, everyone has the ability to do so. You just need to find the right way. Are you a more outgoing person? Are you someone who loves a camera? Are you someone who enjoys one-on-one conversations more? All that can be beneficial, and there's formats and ways of communication for all those things. It's just about finding your right way. And I think the other thing, and we've already spoken about that, and I'm really happy that we already spoken about it, is I think passion is important. Like the honest passion about being a scientist and for what you do and what the people you work with do, not necessarily only yourself. It's great if you're passionate about yourself, but probably should look at other people too. And I think that can be really helpful. And I think that's something that is hugely important, to convey that passion that you have. And another thing I think is important, at least to me, is honesty, because I think when asked to communicate, we often pretend to know right and wrong, and we pretend to be a bit more sure than we are actually sure about stuff. And I think that's something that can be tricky. I think talking about failures and talking about things that didn't go right are equally as important. You should be confident enough to do so.
Fantastic. And I would like to just address this to all of you, if you'd like to comment a bit. Trity?
So I want to kind of take off from what Rebecca was saying in regards to the evolution of a position in science communication. So in my case, I started off in a traditional way where you learn about the science, you work with the scientists, and then you write about it or you create a website. You know, I was the editor of a publication. I had a team that was building websites. We created materials to highlight the science. And as I did that, I realized my strengths also lend themselves to training the scientists to do a better job of communicating for themselves. So in that regard, I started off again in a very traditional communications way, which is you, in a private coaching session, work with the scientists before they have a big presentation or before they have to step in front of media. And then that kind of morphed into, well, is there a course that could be taught in this regard? And I was at Caltech and I had a very supportive associate division chair who said, yeah, we could try to pilot courses to teach graduate students how to go out of just the typical modes of communicating, which are writing papers, going to conferences, to a broader audience. And that required partnerships, right? So that's where I had to bring in my professional communications colleagues, partner with them to teach scientists about this bigger world that they could go into. One of the images I love using is a fishbowl, and I would show a fish jumping from a fishbowl to a much bigger fishbowl to show that there's a possibility. Like if you really learn to share your passion in science with the greater world, there's so many more possibilities open up for you. And that's how I have carved my career in science communication. So one is understanding the science, working with the scientists to present it to a bigger world. The other is training and coaching the individuals such that they have more of an impact in the whatever realm they want to be in, whether they want to continue in science, whether they want to continue to be in policy, whatever the realm is that they want to be in. How can you have a bigger impact than just as a scientist?
Awesome. Very good. I would love to be in a coach with you, Trity.
In fact, I was going to say, I wish that every single science bachelor would have such a course, because independently of going to science communication or not, I had the feeling for the 15 years I did science, you need to be that 7 instrument man, you need to be a salesman because you need the proposal to get your money. You need good ideas, you need to know your science, you need to communicate it, teach it, to mentor other students. So those skills, even if you just want to stay in the realm of core science, would still be so useful. So if any universities in the world are listening, reach out to Trity. We need to implement these courses everywhere. Sorry, Rômulo, I cut your word.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a hope of mine, and it's starting to happen, but nowhere near to the extent that it needs to. And as I listen to Trity, I think about the one-on-one coaching you get to do with people helps them build a level of capability to do so much more. And when you think about the world needing to have more scientist voices out there, I think it's an imperative for us. I really do. I think we need to figure out how to, we can't just create experts without helping them learn how to go out into the world. And I think it was you, Márcia, who referenced working just within an organization. Teams solve problems, and everybody comes to a team with their own paradigm about science and their own language. Just learning how to understand each other better is mission critical. Even if you don't get into science communication, the opportunity to learn these skills is key. And I want to make one other point. Rebecca, you talked about audience, knowing the audience, and I have a distaste for the word audience. I always talk about it from the standpoint of listeners. And I say this for 3 reasons. One is you want people to be able to listen to you, to want to listen to you, and to keep listening to you. And when you think about that, it makes you stop and recognize you have to be engaging. You have to talk about the things that matter to them, not just everything you know, but what matters to them. And you have to figure out how to connect as a person and a scientist. So that's a frame of reference that I think is important to have if you want to become a science communicator. Think about who's listening and how you can encourage them to listen.
Fantastic.
If I can add to that, I agree about the term audience being a bit wrong there. I think it's the most commonly used.
Exactly.
I'm not a huge fan of listener either. I'm a huge fan of the concept you outlined, but I think listener kind of could suggest, not in the way you outlined it, but just as a word, it could suggest that the only purpose of the people you talk to is to listen to you. So I think we now tend to, or see a slight shift going over to actually calling them interaction groups, which I kind of find an interesting term, and that goes a bit into what you were outlining then. But I think it's a very important thing that it's not about just talking to people,
right?
I think that's quite interesting, that we still. I think in many ways that's something in science communication that is very interesting, because it's a new field. So in some ways we all talk about the same things, but we don't really have the right terminology for it yet. And I find that very interesting and fascinating, because it's a discipline concerned with science that is very unscientific itself.
Absolutely. And I think your point is key about being understood. However you communicate, you have to be understood. And that is what underlies the idea of being effective, is that you figured out how to say it or write it in a way where people can understand.
And to that point, Amy, I would just like to say the only thing I think it was not yet covered, which was simple versus complicated, because so many people believe that science needs to be communicated in a serious manner to be taken seriously. And I think that there are occasions for that, but there are so many other occasions to do it differently. We all been in those lectures where you hear a lifetime of science, 20 years of evolution, and that speaker just made it sound so easy. And those are the talks you remember. So to be a good communicator, you need to make it sound easy, even when it is not, and to make it memorable, because in the end, you want to trigger an action in that audience. You want to excite people, or you want to trigger people to learn more about the topic. Whatever is your goal, you need to trigger that action, and you're not getting anywhere by trying to impress the audience, maybe listeners, maybe interaction groups. You will not achieve that goal if you're just trying to impress them with loads of data that don't speak to the audience in a quick way. So I think everything else was already covered.
Thank you so much. True. Thank you so much for all the words, and really taking advantage of Márcia, what she said about simple versus complicated. We just received a question from the YouTube, and then Albrecht is going to address this. And it's very much, it's a good way to reflect about, the currently happening still on.
The question from YouTube is the following. I would like to ask the experts to comment about the scientific communication to the public during the COVID-19 pandemic. Could have something been done better? If yes, how can we do better next time? Trity, do you have something to say to that?
Sure. So actually, this was part of the work that I did with internally with the Moore Foundation, because our president has been very active in communicating. He's really passionate about not only communicating with your head, but also with your heart, because an issue such as vaccines is really critical for us to engage the heart and the mind. What I would say is, and it's been said before, but I would kind of say it in a kind of checklist format, because I think scientists love that, is I would say there are 5 things to keep in mind when you're trying to communicate about a subject such as vaccines or COVID-19. The first is it's really important to define your target audience. Who are you trying to reach? Are you trying to reach my grandmother who is surrounded by individuals who are afraid of a particular aspect of the vaccine? Or are you trying to reach someone who is working in a lab and is trying to advance the technology for vaccine? Like, be really specific. Who is your target audience and why are you trying to reach them? Then the purpose of your communication. What is your core message? Be clear about why you're communicating, right? So with the grandmother example, my core message would be, Grandma, I want you to live. I want you to get the vaccine to live, right? So I'm going to do everything I can to get you to that point. Whereas with a scientist who's working on the vaccine technology, it's for them to raise their profile and get another job, right? So be very specific, not only about your target audience, but the purpose of your communication. Then the third is meet your audience where they are. How you share the information is critical. The visual I have in my mind is I hold the hand of my audience member. I'm walking with them along the path and we're talking, we're having a conversation. I'm not talking down to them. I'm not in my little bubble trying to shout out of my bubble, right? I'm walking next to my audience member hand in hand. And this how is really critical. Then there's an approach that initially started with the MIT CommLab, and that's one of the resources we're going to share, which I really like, which is the hourglass approach to communication. Begin with the broadest, begin with what's known, then get to the very specifics of what you're trying to communicate, and then broaden again. And it's called the hourglass communication. It could be used when you're writing papers, it could be used when you're doing a pitch. There are many different ways you can use the hourglass. But this approach of grounding your message with what's known, what can engage people, then the detailed specifics of the mRNA vaccine, then broadening again can really be helpful. And last, and honestly, I would say the most important is check your assumptions. We all walk into interactions and communication assuming a gazillion things, right? In this 2D world of virtual communication, we assume that our audience member is completely focused on us. They're not. I am sure many of the people listening right now are half doing their work, dealing with their dog, with their children, right? Check your assumptions. Not everybody's there sitting waiting to hear the fabulous golden words coming out of my mouth. You have to get them when they're ready, and you have to give your core message in a way that is absorbed, and also be open to them challenging it, open to them taking time and coming back to you to learn more. I hope that was helpful.
Definitely. And also in the field that we have already kind of slightly talked about how do you actually try to tone the message that you want to send out to your interactions group. Amy, do you have some tips for us in this regard?
Absolutely. I think what Trity just explained is part of that process. That is what you have to think about in order to tailor. And you have to appreciate that in every situation, there will be different needs for the people who you're interacting with. So you have to have the empathy to put yourself in their shoes. And you also have to have the ability to observe the reaction they're having. And I loved the way she spoke in terms of having a conversation, holding someone's hand. That's a beautiful metaphor. And the point about conversation is so important. You know, as scientists with academic training, you live often in an environment where you're rewarded for sounding scholarly. And one of the biggest shifts you need to make is to learn to show up as a human and be conversational when you talk about the things you know, and to be tuned into the emotions that people have. And that's another key area here that I think is important if you want to pursue science communication careers is to recognize the importance of emotion. The brain science on triggering emotional reactions says that it makes the message more memorable if you can trigger something at an emotional level. And that's hard for a lot of science trained people because that's not how you do science. So it's one of those important shifts you need to be able to make.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, do you also have something as a hint to how to address these different interest groups?
Yeah, just one quick thing to add to that point, which I obviously agree to, is I think something else that's very important is not only to talk about results, and I think it is a very big issue we used to have in science communication, and I think it's getting better, that we concentrated so much on telling people our results and the great things we found that we forgot to teach people how science works. And I think if now I would give one recommendation to people, I would always think, include the how does it work in your process? Because if we're going back to the COVID question and making the turn there, apart from not being able to reach the people in the according way sometimes, the other big thing that came up was that we actually failed to explain how science works for a long time. And thus we constantly had people being like, what? A scientist doesn't agree with another scientist? And every scientist went like, yeah, that's normal. And I think that's something that's very important. And that's that's something we should really work on to find out how we can transport the methods and processes and values of science. And that's where the emotions come in, along with the actual knowledge we gain. And I think that's something that I would love to stress in educating people about science communication.
Very good. I will just now thinking back, when I was starting my journey in science communication, I was particularly asking a friend. He did his undergrad studies in marketing. And I have asked him, oh, have you encountered something like marketing and science communication? Have you seen something similarly? Because back then, the science or the ground of knowledge comes from some of these things. Of course, I don't want to be misunderstood here. I really like the quote, for example, that I took from Amy's book, which says from Jay Conger, it's important for people to understand that persuasion for what it is. It's not convincing and selling, but it's actually learning and negotiating. So this really changed my mind. And I would like to address this to Márcia. For example, Márcia, you have dealt with these things in pharmaceutical company. And maybe physicians are very much into what is the cheapest, what is the best, and how to get away from this and not get much involved. Or do you think, for example, tools that marketing being used, Amy addressed this very nicely in her book, we can take them, but not get poisoned by them. How do you think about it?
So I think that there are communication techniques that have been sharpened by marketing, but they fit also their own specific purpose. For example, as part of the medical function within a company, we still put the medical education and not the sales first. So that's the role of the medical organization, is bringing the patient to the center, is trying to educate doctors, ultimately to address a patient unmet need. So I don't see the marketing on that perspective of triggering the sales, but I see it from a perspective of how can we help and how can we educate doctors, accessing the information they need in this very crowded world where you get bombarded with information. How do you find the right information? How do you raise awareness about diseases so that a doctor makes that more informed decision? Because you would be surprised how sometimes doctors are making emotional decisions as well. So we would imagine that data speaks by itself. And if you show 2 clinical trials, they're going to go for the one that has the best rate of survival or the best remission of disease. But many times they might prescribe something that they've been doing for 20 years because they know the drug, they know the patients that are on that medication, and they might make the emotional decision of, I'll go with this one. Maybe it's not as good, but I know it. So that's when kind of medical communications has to cut through that noise, make that emotional connection, but bring the science forward. So it's like a delicate balance. But yes, there are techniques in marketing, like, for example, audience segmentation, which has already been covered by lots of people, of understanding which types of audience you have and tailor the communications, the formats, the channels that you use to get that audience. You have, for example, again, bringing doctors as a potential audience. They all have different ways of working. Some of them are very much into social media. Some just go to journals and they get the information directly from the publications. Other like podcasts, people that have to commute along the lines. They don't want long decks to read. They want something. They want to hear peer-to-peer interaction. So there are some things that we can learn from marketing communication skills, but the purpose depends on what you do. So for me, it's not about the sales. It's more about improving that patient outcome and how can I get there from different angles. So, but maybe somebody else has a different opinion. So looking forward to hear.
Please, Trity, yes.
I don't have a different opinion. I just want to share how I share this with the student audience, right? So the way that I teach this is I go from telling to selling, right? From thinking about the types of scientific products like technical reports and manuscripts that tell, right? They're explaining what the process is, to selling. So the types of products that science students can think about in terms of selling are op-eds. And there's some great examples of scientists writing opinion pieces for well-known newspapers and other sources, right? Or proposals. In a scientific proposal, you are not saying, this is the work that I've done, these are my results. You're trying to persuade that committee to fund your work over the hundreds of other scientists who are doing similar work to you. So that's more of a selling or persuading approach, right? The other is a resume, right? You don't write your resume, somebody else mentioned this, just to list all the papers you've put. You write your resume in a way to convince the audience, the listener, that I love all the terms we're using for, but the person on the other side of the table to hire you, right? You are the best person to be hired, and that's you selling yourself to be hired. Finally, letters. There are many ways. You know, we talked about various ways to get into science communication. I would say a critical one is building your network and having reference letters. What's the point of a reference letter? It's someone trusting that you are the right person and writing a persuasive piece to get their colleague, their peer to hire you. All of this is persuasion. It's not just listing a bunch of information or passing on knowledge, right? This is the act of being human, and this is the act of being successful in whatever career you're in.
Fantastic, which means that depending on the case, you need to switch the gears accordingly. And fantastic. Rebecca, would you like to also comment, and maybe after Amy, please?
Yeah, yes, I can. I'm always very intrigued by the idea of learning from marketing for science communication. I think one thing that is very, very crucial is to be transparent about why you communicate and what's behind you and from what perspective you come. For scientists who are communicating as scientists, I would always love for them to not communicate for marketing and self-promotion purposes. I think there should be a greater good to communicating as a scientist, and I want to believe that all scientists think so. I'm saying I want to believe that. And I think from a so Wissenschaft im Dialog, the company I now work for, we don't have a mission of marketing. So our stance is to promote and foster good science communication in the sense of good science communication for the common good. And I think that's a very good idea to have people with that goal in mind, which doesn't mean that it doesn't need good PR and good marketing for companies. That's all fine. But I think what you have to be really clear about is, what is it that you're doing? You can't pretend to be doing science communication for the common good if actually you're selling a product. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad product, but you have to make sure that people know you're actually selling something.
I love that, Rebecca, because I think integrity is part of what will enable you to succeed, and having the right intention around what you do is key to being effective in any career you have. And I'll add another term here, and that's the term influence. You know, as scientists, we're influencing others all the time, trying to get them to support our ideas and trying to get decisions made in our favor. So there's an opportunity, I think, to recognize that there are things about marketing communications, which is really being clear about a message and a target. And also being strategic. I want to take a minute to just talk about that. I think one of the other gifts that scientists have is, you know, as you've done your research and you've had to look at what you've learned and evolve and take new paths, you've developed some strategy skills that can transfer into communications roles. And I think that if you can think about the end goal, and if you believe in your purpose, and Márcia, you said it so well, you know, you're not doing this because you're trying to sell product. You're doing this because you believe there is value to the patient. And that's the perspective I have when it comes to persuading, influencing, marketing. I like to think of it this way: show other people the value that you see.
That is a very good point. And we've been talking about honesty and integrity now, and we actually got a question from YouTube also going in that direction. How would you handle a public conversation with someone who is spreading fake news on a controversial topic? It is difficult to have all the facts at hand at once. So how would you actually handle that as a good communicator? Amy, if you have...
I'm happy to start.
Okay, Trity?
I think the first, and we've pointed to this multiple times here. The first is change your mindset, right? The deficit model of science communication. And what I mean by that, the deficit model of science communication is that there is some lack of knowledge. There's some big hole that we are here to fill. That model does not work. Okay, I'm going to debunk that. That doesn't work. So when you are hearing an individual spread misinformation and fake news, it's not your job to go and say, no, this is the truth. This is the checklist. This is what you need to know. That is not our job. What our job, I feel, and my panelists can disagree with me, is to sit back, really try to understand where they're coming from. And here's where I rely on my training as a mediator. I spent several years being trained by the Mediation Center of the Pacific. What is behind what this person's saying? What is their true interest in this situation? And if you do that, if you sit back, you get a better picture of why this is happening and whether you are the right person to address this, whether this forum is the right forum to address it, because you don't want to appear as the person that's just attacking them, because you're just going to give them more fuel for their fire, right? So you need to be, I see it as a dance, right? You need to step back and kind of, okay, where are they going? Why are they going here? Am I the right dance partner for them? And is this the right dance floor, right? What else can I do? And in so many situations, including countering misinformation, I think it's more effective to do it behind the scenes, right? Befriend the person, connect with the person, use direct messaging, use email, set up a direct Zoom call with them, talk to them and see if you can really get to a common place, and then use that common place to attempt to turn opinion towards something that's more accurate or scientific.
That's a wonderful answer to this. And also, since actually the time for our session is going a bit late, I definitely want, from my side, thank you all for that. It has been very enlightening for me, as someone who's still in the science and a very, very non-emotional, strict, objective way of thinking. It was really wonderful to hear what it actually makes a difference between science and science communication, and how important it is to show more emotion, something that at work I try to keep locked up so that my results stay comparable to everything else. So thank you very much for your insights on that. Rômulo, do you also have something to add to that?
Well, I since the beginning we were planning this together, I was already thrilled to be among them, and I'm so inspired. And I just took some of the notes, for example, that, yeah, me, you, Albrecht, and others that will be watching this later, when they will be, as me and you, starting our journey in science communication, we already have our soft skills. We need maybe to polish them, or we can learn by ourselves. We know how at least make a nice, good storytelling. We have ways to make it very simple versus complicated. We can use words to this. You can build ways to connect with the audience. Always the audience, it will be the first. And this very delicate moments that maybe, yeah, marketing from my point of view, it's kind of a useful resource. You have to be very careful and have to be the most very transparent where we are selling or where we are convening or we're putting together in the people. Have you some other comments, Albrecht?
I wholeheartedly agree. We usually don't have like lectures in science yet. Hopefully that will change, as you've mentioned it, about
maybe we'll be in the future.
Hopefully that it would be very, very useful. And yes, it's already really interesting to know that we already have some of these skills, but they're just like kind of covered in all the things that are going on around us in the lab, in all the work hours that we have to do to get the experiments. So it's really wonderful to hear about all your roads that lead you to where you are now. And from what I heard, that sounds like all of them sound like really nice careers. And I hope that I will be able to follow a similar path than as you, and kind of also in your footsteps.
Thank you. Yeah, girl, I would like to ask you to have any comments about it in our final words to finish our session.
And just go ahead and say, if you're listening to this, it means that there's the interest already on that side. So my advice is just try it. This is, if you want to do a career change or try something new, this is not Squid Game. You don't die if you fail. So just go ahead and do it. And if it goes wrong, what is the worst that can happen? You just go back to the path you were before, or you try even another, even different from the ones before. So just go for it.
Okay, Amy, would like to say something to just the final words?
I'll amplify and just say, informational interviewing is a step you can take when you want to explore career directions. And there are people like us who will take time to say, this is how I got here, this is what I did, and help you get a sense of what the work is. So, LinkedIn makes it easy to find people who have science communications titles. And if you want to understand how you get into the field, finding people who've been at it for a few years would be the right way to target who you speak to. So I highly encourage you to explore what the work is like and look for opportunities to do a project for somebody, because then you have proof for yourself and also for somebody you'll interview with that you have the skills that are needed. And this has just been so much fun. Thank you for inviting me. Terrific group of people to bring together today. And I'm delighted to know that you're all doing your work in the world.
Thank you. Rebecca, you would like to say something?
Yeah, just agreeing on that, all the things said. Yeah, be in touch if anyone has any questions coming up afterwards.
Sure.
We're always
Absolutely.
looking for people. We're always looking for people to talk to. We're always trying to point people into the right directions. I mean it if I say, Google my name, you'll find some sort of form of communication. Slip into my Twitter DMs, whatever you want to do. Get in touch. I'm really happy to foster people's interest in science communication. That's all my job is.
Very
Thank you.
fantastic.
Yes.
Trity, do you also have some final comments?
Sure. So sure. I would say begin with checking your assumptions. Those of us that have been trained in science have been trained to be in our heads. To truly be wise, wisdom is not just from your head. Wisdom comes from head and heart. So try to unite your mind and your heart, your emotions, to move forward in a wise way in the world. Thank you for this opportunity, you guys.
Thank you.
thank you for being here and talking with us and sharing all of your knowledge.
Yeah, we are sharp at 7. Fantastic. I'm so proud of this. Yes, and now I will just move the words to Kuan, the founder of Open Box Science, and he will be summarizing some of the main findings of today's seminar. And thank you so much for all.
Thanks, Rômulo.
Oh, it's Eugenio, sorry.
Juan couldn't be today with us, but first of all, I want to thank a round of applause for all our speakers today, our organizers as well, Rômulo, Albrecht, and our moderators today, and most importantly, all of our audience that join us today in this great, and I hope we could do more of these type of symposiums to promote science communications, which I think it's really important for all of the society, for me as a student of in science. And finally, I will also like to invite you to, if you have any comments about our project, our sessions today, please feel free to reach out. And we also are looking for people interested in joining our team. We are, as I mentioned before, an organization that seeks for promoting science in creating safe spaces for science discussion, and we currently are promoting neuroscience, immunology, genetics, but we are looking for people that could promote also other types of science as well. And I would like to invite our audience. Tomorrow we have this Open Box Science Thursday webinar series, focusing mainly on tumor metastases in the brain, but also we also have, this is tomorrow, and we also have one in April regarding astrocytes. We have two great speakers, and hopefully we could have more seminars as well. And that's me for all. And yes, we also invite people to join our project, which I think it's really helpful for connecting scientists and all over the world. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rômulo. Thanks, everyone.